Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It is good to see so many people taking an interest in internet freedom today. Understandably, there's also a great interest in the participation of Karl Theodor zu Guttenberg in the EU's no disconnect strategy. I just want to remind you that this is definitely a press conference about internet freedom, and there are many people suffering at the moment because of a lack of those freedoms, and they're the people we are trying to help. Before we turn to questions, we'll first hear from European Commission Vice President Neelie Kroes about the no disconnect strategy, and then we will hear from Karl Theodor about how he will take forward his role within that strategy. So I now turn to Neelie Kroes.
Good morning again. Human rights run through everything we do here in Europe and in the EU. And the right to communicate freely is one of the most basic of those human rights. And just as I have taken freedom of expression seriously within the Union, I now extend that beyond the Union with the launch of the EU's non-disconnect strategy. The Arab Spring was a wake-up call for all of us about the global desire for democracy and about the positive role technology can play. In Egypt, social media tools allowed people to bypass state-censored media, and everyone with a mobile phone could be a journalist. In 1982, in Syria, the Hama massacre was hidden for months. In 2011, video sharing services helped expose regime abuses, and they made us aware and better able to take action. Repressive regimes now understand the power of those networks and have tried to turn them off. They did not succeed, and the EU is working to ensure online rights are respected like offline rights. We have been talking to experts, we have been talking to policymakers, to activists themselves, and I call our work in this area in supporting NGOs and activists that use to promote fundamental rights our no disconnect strategy. Because when peaceful protests are being planned, connectivity is everything. And communication networks must stay switched on. Networks of people, organizers, protesters, activists must stay plugged into them and to each other. And that is how they can mobilize safely and effectively. Used correctly, technology helps activists to deliver democracy without being spied on by authorities. And I think our approach needs to take into account four main strengths. Number one, we must develop and distribute tools to help activists bypass restrictions on their freedom to communicate, while on the other hand avoiding indiscriminative surveillance. Tools which are simple and which are ready-made. Number two, to educate activists about the opportunities and risks of using ICT. And number three, to ensure we have high-qualified and high-quality intelligence about what is going on the ground, so to say, so we can respond where it counts, and we shouldn't rely only on others for that intelligence. And fourth, all the actors in the field must cooperate. Please cooperate to play to our own strengths without duplicating words. And I spoke in more detail on all of those issues last Friday at an international conference in The Hague. But for obvious reasons, I cannot speak publicly about all the elements of the strategy. Three of the most important actions I want you to know about are: number one, deployment of internet survival packs to activists. Easy to use software and hardware packages helping people to bypass censorship and counter surveillance. Number two, stimulating EU companies to develop self-regulatory approaches or join existing ones, such as the Global Network Initiative, so we stop selling despots their ICT tools of repression. And number 3, hosting support to help prohibit content reach its audience, so blogs and videos, for example. And I also know the priority of the European Parliament attaches to internet freedom as an essential part of our approach to protect human rights. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is quite a complex task, easier said than done, so to say. And I myself am working closely with Cathy Ashton and the External Action Service, but we will need all the sectors and all good ideas. And to give you an example of the thinking I bring to this issue, already in the era of the EU media freedom, I've asked advice from a number of wise and experienced people, including, by the way, of Herta Däubler-Gmelin, the former German Minister of Justice, and therefore I've asked Karl Theodor to Guttenberg to assist me on the right way to take forward and implement our no disconnect strategy. I approached Karl Theodor before the summer, and this was my choice, it was my idea, and I'm looking for talent and I'm not looking for saints. Having worked with him when he was economics minister in Germany, I know his vision of freedom, I know his international outlook, and that he values European action and understands we have more international weight we have when we act together. Karl Theodor has indeed led 2 ministries with direct relevance to this work. As a former head of armed and security services with deep experience in foreign affairs, I know Karl Theodor can have the right conversations and give internet freedom the prominence it deserves. I'm delighted he has accepted my invitation to assist me on a voluntary basis, and I would like to hand over him to talk about how he will take forward this job.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Kroes, for outlining this most important initiative, and thank you for asking me to be a part of this very challenging project. The no disconnect strategy will be successful if the key players involved are willing and capable to cooperate and to coordinate their efforts. Key players are, aside from EU institutions, member states and third states, NGOs, the private sector, also the intelligence community, etc. The 4th goal Nelly has just stated, it was 4 goals we have heard just before, namely the task to properly coordinate, and the call for cooperation sounds easier than it is. There's a clear necessity to share information, to share experiences, and to avoid duplications in between and amongst those key players. You may have heard of similar or analog initiatives of the US administration, for instance, of Sweden or the Netherlands. There was just a conference just a couple of days ago. Each of these initiatives share a common goal, and I don't think any of them is per se better or worse, but we should cooperate much closer than we are doing at the moment. Nelly Kroes has mentioned that this initiative aims to provide the EU with a common framework to intervene in this area. Disjointed action by only a few member states or other third countries are not going to help those who are really in need. And this message needs to be transported, and I'll gladly help to communicate it. Many NGOs and activists have done an excellent job so far, but we do think that the support of states and other public authorities, either financially or by helping coordination, communication and dialogue, as well as through conferring democratic legitimacy, will also benefit civil society. Sometimes activists may not have all the crucial information to ensure their actions are truly effective. Cooperation with public authorities can ultimately provide a more coherent approach also for them. What am I going to do? I'll try to liaise with member and third states governments, specifically also with the US administration, with NGOs, the private sector, and with the main players involved. First, to deliver the Commission's key messages. Secondly, to find ways of cooperation and coordination. And in my role as an independent advisor, I reconnect with the Commissioner all the information I collect on how to provide ongoing support to Internet users, to bloggers and cyber activists living under authoritarian regimes. This task certainly will take time, and I will use my widespread contacts I gained during my political tenure in foreign affairs and security and economic affairs to reach out to the protagonists that I have mentioned. Regarding freedom of the Internet, I have also gained some experience with possible fields of tension or discussion with the Internet community. May it be the debate about how to effectively tackle the terrible crime of child pornography, where it came to certain restrictions in some states, also in Germany. I have full respect for differing opinions on the different possible measures and on the questions of how useful they are. But this is certainly not comparable to the case we are discussing today. No democracy operates under a free-for-all or free-of-all model, especially when serious criminal aspects are involved. And it is important to recognize that legitimate restrictions in democratic countries are different from censorship in order to suppress the exercise of democracy and fundamental freedoms. And I gained some significant experience regarding the overall topic cybersecurity, also cyber war. Nelly has just mentioned that this is a very crucial topic also for the defense and the security question as such. And last but not least, I've been personally exposed to the power of the Internet just this year, and I recognize and value its ability to hold those in power to account. There have been a couple of interesting questions during last week. I've just followed that through the press. And just to make clear, my home base, and I call it at the moment my home base, is and will be the United States, where some of the more important players are located. But I'll certainly travel to Europe and to other places whenever necessary. Thank you, Nelly, for this most remarkable initiative, and I'm happy and honored to help wherever I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelly. Thank you, Karl Theodor. We'll now move to questions. If I could take your questions in relation to the no disconnect strategy, please. Who'd like to go?
Sabine Brendel, Watts Media Group. Mrs. Cruz, I have a question to you. You said you don't want any saints but talents, but wouldn't it have been wiser to choose someone who is, at least in Germany, a very important member state, someone with a much better reputation than Mr. Guttenberg is? Thank you.
I'm the one who picked Karl Theodor out, and I'm delighted that he said yes. He is capable, he is talented, he is an out-of-the-box thinker, and I really need someone like him. And that having said, I'm looking forward to the cooperation, and we can't use a lot of time to discuss other issues. We need to do our job. Time is not our friend in this issue of no disconnection.
Bonjour, question en français, si vous permettez.
A question in French, if I may.
Question pour la commissaire Cruz.
For Commissioner Cruz, your spokesman has just said that this is a press conference about the Internet. So the presence of Mr. Guttenberg suggests that the European Commission in the future will have a more flexible approach on the protection of intellectual property on the Internet, and also in the area of foreign trade links, in particular with China.
We are absolutely aware that it is quite a complicated dossier that we are facing. It is connected with a lot of issues. But what is at stake? And that is the main question I asked Carl Theodor to find out. How can we be of help? How can we be instrumental talking about the non-disconnection policy? And what we did agree upon is that it is quite spread over. It is not only finding out what is going on in Europe. Quite a number of our potential partners are in the US, but also elsewhere. And what is at stake? And that is what I learned again on Friday last week during that conference in The Hague, that it is quite urgent and that people are really suffering. So we should take first things first. And first thing first is how can we cooperate with NGOs and the activists and those who are just taking initiatives under circumstances where the regime where they are living with is not very hostile, or is very hostile too.
Okay, you're next.
Herr zu Guttenberg, eine Frage: Freiheit im Internet, heißt das nach Ihrer Lesart Copy and Paste für alle?
Does that mean copy and paste for all?
I certainly have got some experience regarding the question you have just raised. Freedom of internet is the main goal we are following here, but I've also talked about certain limits one can or could see within democratic countries, but it has to be in a democratic framework. It has to be in a framework of rule of law, and this is what we are following here.
If you could just use the microphone on your side then.
I have a short question regarding, first of all, your job as independent advisor. Are you going to get paid? What is the relation to the Commission? And then another question regarding the time frame. You said you're going to be based in the US and you're going to get back to the Commission, but what are the next steps?
No payment. It is just travel expenses and no time limitation. For if we put time limitation on this asking Mr. Guttenberg, then we should be aware what is at stake in the time limitation. So no time limitation, going for the job, and we will find out. It is absolutely open for whatever has to be done, and that in close cooperation with Cathy Ashton and with her services, so to say, and we will inform you if there is something news to mention.
Just to follow up your one question, I'll be based in the US, that's right, and I'll travel from there, and I just lined out before there are significant players in the US as well, where we would love and we would like to connect as well. And whenever there's a necessity to travel, I'll do so. And of course we will make a roadmap whom to meet and when to meet and how to meet and all those things, but this is now up to the next weeks and months to come, and there's certainly no time limit.
We have several questions from up the back, so it's the man at the very end of the aisle in the jacket. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Christopher Ziedler for the Stuttgarter Zeitung and the Tagesspiegel. Mr. zu Guttenberg, you've been widely criticized for having carefully planned your return to the political stage in Germany. Can you tell us why this appearance today here is not part of this strategy you're being accused of?
You don't see me in Germany.
It is me who you can blame, for I have been asking Mr. zu Guttenberg, and I am delighted with his talents and his way of approaching this issue that he said yes to my question.
Maybe just one thing to add, just to avoid misunderstandings. This is no political comeback, and just to keep in mind, I've just moved to the United States, I've just moved there with my family, and I'm not planning to be back within the next weeks or months to come.
We had a man in the tweed jacket in the front row. You still have a question? No? Okay, now in the black jacket near the end of the aisle.
Philippe Sauer, Agence France Presse. Madame la Commissaire, vous avez mentionné l'expérience et les talents de
you talked about Mr. zu Guttenberg's talent and experience, but don't you think that credibility is a vital aspect to manage this, and would you take credibility for granted in this case?
I completely trust Mr. zu Guttenberg, otherwise I wouldn't have asked him. By the way, I learned more from my mistakes than from my successes, and I can assure you that my list of mistakes in life are quite long.
The lady in the pink blouse.
Maren Winterfeld, Watz Mediengruppe. Herr zu Guttenberg, Sie haben gerade gesagt, Sie planen kein politisches Comeback, aber Sie haben gerade mit Blick auf die deutsche Medienlandschaft, sind Sie mehr oder weniger rehabilitiert, wenn man in die Zeit schaut von in den letzten Wochen. Planen Sie nicht langfristig in die deutsche Politik zurückzukehren?
Aren't you planning in the long term of returning to German politics?
And this topic you have just raised is not connected to the topic we're discussing today.
Jen Baker.
I have a question about the no disconnect strategy. You mentioned the giving software packages to activists. Can you tell us a bit more about the software, and also how you will choose these activists and how they and their anonymity might be protected, and also whether you have any fears that such software, which may include circumnavigating censorship, might fall into the wrong hands and be used for, as Ms. Guttenberg mentioned, issues around child pornography, and it can be used for nefarious means as well.
Let me start with saying thank you that you go to the subject. Having said that, many authoritarian regimes are censoring the internet for the sole purpose of stifling political dissent without any kind of democratic safeguard. Providing citizens of those countries with tools to bypass this kind of censorship is a small but important step to help the democratization processes. You won't blame me if I'm not going in detail what's in the kit, for that wouldn't be wise of me. And we are listening, and that is one of the issues that Karl Theodor will certainly get more specific information on what is making most of the sense. And when you are talking about other issues, the very naughty ones are already aware of it, so we have to help the good ones, so to say, and we have to give them the backing, but more information, what is at stake, that they don't take more risk than is strictly in this field available.
Hi, Peter Ehrlich, Financial Times Deutschland. May I ask a question about the impact on foreign policy of the European Union? The latest scene where bloggers were very active was Russia during the last days. Do you think it will, or is Russia or the same China a target for these to help people, internet bloggers there, and don't you think that that will cause a major conflict with some of the big partners of the European Union?
Anyhow, we were touching upon this earlier on. It's global, but of course within the EU it's closely connected with foreign issues, and therefore I'm quite happy that Cathy and I myself, that we are indeed working together. Normally spoken, she was planning to attend this press conference, but unfortunately her agenda was not making that part available, free for this. Each case, to be precise, will be looked on at its merits, but always within the framework of the foreign policy of the EU and applicable international law. But there is still quite a bit to do, and that was also proved last Friday.
in the blue tie.
Commissioner Frank Hofmann, Deutsche Welle Television. I wonder whether you will have also people in your DG that are going to help with this concept and with this project. Will there be IT personnel active providing what you just mentioned, software on your internet site, or is this just a project for a new job of a fallen German minister? Thank you.
I'm not one who is creating new jobs for people who are not active anymore. That is not the case. Karl Theodor is quite active. So therefore I'm also delighted that he is willing to take some time out of his agenda to fill in for this. My people will be, of course, available when it's needed for giving backing or whatever, but there is no special staff for Mr. zu Guttenberg.
Yes.
This is Christian Feld of ARD German TV. My question is, do you have plans to actively address those states who try to disconnect bloggers?
It depends on the case you are talking of. Sometimes that is very unwise, and sometimes it makes sense. So, depending on the case we are faced with.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Could you give us examples of states where you think it might make sense to address those states?
I think that's not wise to do it here. So let's wait till I get a bit more information from Karl Theodor and what my answer is all about. It is not a matter of it can be only not mentioning or it can only be mentioning. So it depends on the situation. We need to be very careful, and that was again my experience last Friday, but not only last Friday. In the last couple of months I met quite a number of those activists and who are really in danger and are taking quite a bit of risk, so to say. So I wouldn't dare to take an action where they are more in danger than they are already. So we have to act sometimes via NGOs, sometimes via other organizations, but you can be absolutely certain we take our responsibility, and it's not about us to be on the front page, it's about really changing that type of situations that we don't like at all, that there is no freedom of expression and that there is no possibility of having a democracy.
Yeah. Now go to the lady in the red scarf, and there's a man behind her for the follow-up question.
Martina Herzog, German Press Agency, DPA. Since this is an initiative about transparency, will we see some follow-up report after half a year about the results that have been achieved?
The best moment would be if the two of us or the three of us are standing here and mentioning that in a specific country there is indeed a wake-up, that there is spring, and that things have been changed. And I would be delighted to mention that to you. So anyhow, what can be communicated, for you know me in the meantime, I am absolutely in favor for transparency and openness, but in this dossier it is also asking for a lot of carefulness because it is about risk for people.
Martina, you have a follow-up?
But certainly there will be some kind of evaluation on whatever level of I don't know, of abstractness of what has been achieved after half a year or a year or whenever.
If there is a possibility to be clear to you, and if there is an opportunity to communicate that this is making sense, I will be here.
Don't forget, we just released our open data strategy, so we're all for openness. And so up the back, and then we can move into people who have their second questions.
Frankfurt Allgemeine. Commissaris Kroes, ik had een vraag. U had het over tijdstip, wanneer u het besluit
Commissioner
genomen
Kroes,
had.
you mentioned the moment in time when you took the decision, not now but before. Could you tell us when precisely you took the decision? And secondly, you talked about weaknesses and strong points. Now, the reproach of you is made that sometimes you're a bit stubborn. Would that apply here?
Ben ik? Een beetje wat?
What am I? A bit?
Koppig.
Stubborn.
Als u het vertaalt dat ik niet gauw opgeef,
well, if that means that I don't easily give up, then I would entirely agree with your description. Then yes, I'm stubborn.
Wat betreft het tijdstip waarop ik
As to
de
the
telefoon gepakt heb,
moment in time when I picked up the phone and asked Mr. Guttenberg whether he would be willing to talk to us about this, that moment in time was before the summer.
En om daar aan toe te voegen, dat niet opgeven,
if I
uw woord,
may add, the not giving up, or the way you would call it, being stubborn.
Buitengewoon fundamenteel onderwerp
I think that this is an essential topic of fundamental importance. I'm also discussing these matters with Parliament. The freedom of expression is a crucial principle which also underpins the EU. We're fighting on this on a lot of fronts. We've asked the wise people to talk about it as well, so it's very important indeed.
Herr zu Guttenberg, ich hätte eine Frage.
Mr. zu Guttenberg, I have a question for you. Are you? I'm here at the bottom. First
Sind Sie eigentlich schockiert oder
Are you
irritiert
shocked
oder
or peeved
verunsichert,
or
dass das, was Sie jetzt in
irritated
die Hand nehmen,
or
überlagert wird
feeling
von
insecure in
der
any way
Diskussion Ihre
or
Person?
uncertain? Do you
Stört Sie
think
das?
that
Nervt
what
Sie
we
das?
know about
Oder
you
nehmen Sie
might
das einfach in
overshadow
Kauf?
your
Oder nehmen
work?
Sie dann auch in Kauf,
Or are
dass
you
das
just
vielleicht der Sache
taking
nicht
this
gut
in your stride, or do you accept that there might be some damage
Sache
or
tut es dann
fallout?
gut, wenn man mit Inhalten überzeugen kann, und das ist meine
Well,
Aufgabe, und das will ich tun.
I'm here to convince with the content I'm going to produce. I'm confident I can do that.
Have we got room for any last questions? We're coming into our time for the midday briefing now, so we'll wrap up shortly. Where were those final questions coming from? No, we've got one up from the lady up the back there. And then we can go to Jen Baker, and I think we'll call it a close.
Thank you, Anne Carroll from the Irish Examiner. I'm just wondering, where does this interact with Freedom of Information Acts, which some governments, as we know, tend to overuse?
Would you mind repeating the question? Sorry.
Freedom of Information Act.
Wondering how this interacts with government's use of freedom of information legislation.
I don't see a problem. We can just manage with this dossier and the thing you have mentioned.
Jen, final question.
Just a very quick question. Last Friday, you suggested that technical surveillance companies should not sell their products to regimes with suspect human rights records. Does that form part of this same strategy?
I get connection. It is in clear-cut cases. We can and we have put sanctions in place, such as for Syria. So more frequently, however, it's not easy for us or for companies to decide on those complex matters. And some of those surveillance tools and services are from absolutely a clear technology point of view, not different from what law enforcement agencies use for legitimate purposes. And transparency, by the way, is important to help decision making by all involved. I think, by the way, it's appropriate, and then I'm coming to your question, for the industry to decide where they stand, what they are going to do, and the industry is in an absolutely good position to come up with concrete solutions. And that is the dialogue that is at stake now. We need them to be aware that it's about their reputation and it's about their future too. and we will be of help and be interested in the results of their activities they are making themselves together and be involved.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. I remind you as well that you've got full written materials, both in English, German, and other languages on all of ec.europa.eu's websites, and you can follow @Nelly Cruz EU if you want to have further interaction. Thank you.